When Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon was a little girl, a fortune teller predicted a royal throne for her. Though her life's journey may not quite resemble a rags-to-riches tale, the daughter of Lord Glamis and Cecilia Cavendish Bentinck certainly did not anticipate such a turn. Coming from a wealthy family, Elizabeth had everything she could dream of since childhood. Thus, when she married Prince Albert, the second son of King George V and Queen Mary of Teck, the customs and traditions of the royal family were not a surprise to her. She knew how to present herself in society, what to talk about, and which attire to choose. And most importantly, the future Queen Mother had a keen sense of jewellery. Many of the finest jewels of the royal family belonged to Queen Elizabeth. She assessed their value not by their price, but by the memories associated with them. Particularly meaningful were the gifts from her beloved spouse, Bertie, King George VI. From 1923 to 1925, the Duke of York presented his young wife with lovely gifts in the form of bracelets from the jeweller Cartier on birthdays and Christmas. The Duchess of York wore all 5 bracelets on her arm in a series of portraits taken in the mid-1920s, along with her lotus flower tiara and the Strathmore rose tiara. Acquiring all 5 bracelets in 1925, the Duchess of York also acquired a special attachment from Cartier, allowing her to wear the ensemble of 3 out of the 5 bracelets as a bandeau. Elizabeth began wearing the Cartier tiara band in the late 1920s, and it was often seen in the years leading up to her husband's ascension to the throne. She wore this piece to a ballet performance by the Camargo Ballet Society at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden in 1933, and later that year, she adorned it with a sapphire brooch for a Red Cross event. In the 1970s, the Queen Mother gifted the Art Deco-style Cartier bracelets to her daughter, the Queen, who began wearing them in various styles at state banquets and official dinners. After the Queen, no one else wore the bracelets. The next piece of jewellery that went unworn for a long time was the tiara with the romantic name Strathmore Roses. Designed as a wreath with large blooming rosebuds, this tiara looked splendid as a bandeau. In the 1920s and 1930s, it was fashionable to wear tiaras low on the forehead, a style that suited Elizabeth very well. She received this delicate and highly original tiara as a wedding gift from her own father. The thin wreath of diamond flowers was quite fitting for a young woman just beginning her married life. As Queen, Elizabeth no longer wore the Strathmore Roses tiara, perhaps deeming it sufficient for a duchess but too modest for Her Majesty. The daughters of the royal couple, Elizabeth and Margaret, also never appeared in public wearing this elegant tiara. While its design may seem somewhat outdated now, I still find it very appealing. Princess Catherine even found something captivating about it and wore it to a formal reception in honor of the President and First Lady of Korea. The next magnificent tiara, also worn by Catherine, is called the Lotus flower. The first royal owner of this tiara, named for its dominant lotus flower or papyrus leaf elements, was the Queen Mother. Taking a page from her mother-in-law's book, she had it made from a necklace she received as a wedding gift in 1923. The necklace, adorned with diamonds and pearls, featuring meanders and festoons, was a gift from her husband, the future George VI, who purchased it at Garrard. Nonetheless, Elizabeth decided it would be better dismantled and the precious stones reused elsewhere. Just 6 months after receiving it, Garrard disassembled the necklace and used the diamonds and pearls to create this tiara. Perhaps Bertie learned from his mother not to feel slighted by diamonds given, dismantled and repurposed. Nevertheless, Elizabeth wore the tiara in a series of portraits, which were later widely used in promotional materials for the 1937 coronation, although some illustrators took artistic liberties in depicting it. In my view, this is one of the few tiaras from the 1920s that can be worn either low on the forehead or higher on the head, as we typically see tiaras worn today. The second owner of the tiara, Princess Margaret, wore it in such fashion. Margaret received the tiara from her mother in 1959, shortly before marrying Anthony Armstrong Jones. Alongside the Poltimore, it became one of her most frequently worn diadems. In 1993, Margaret loaned the tiara to the third generation. Her new daughter-in-law, Serena Stanhope, wore the tiara at her wedding to Viscount Linley, Margaret's only son. When Margaret died in 2002, this tiara was not among the pieces auctioned off by her children. Indeed, the Poltimore was the only one of Margaret's tiaras to be sold. For many years, jewellery enthusiasts speculated about the tiara's ownership after Margaret's death. Since Serena Linley wore it at her wedding, many assumed that the Linleys might have inherited the tiara from Margaret. However, in December 2013, the Duchess of Cambridge surprised everyone by wearing the tiara at the annual diplomatic reception. She also wore it in 2015 at a state banquet in honor of the President of China. It turns out, apparently, that Margaret returned the tiara to the royal vaults, either before her death or by her will. And so the lotus flower continues to live on, enjoyed by an entirely new generation of Windsor women. Another cherished piece of jewellery beloved by the Queen Mother was the Duchess of Teck's floral brooch. When you look at old photographs of the Queen Mother, among her daytime attire often appears one particular adornment, a diamond flower brooch with 4 pendants and a detachable diamond chain. This was one of the wedding gifts to the Queen Mother, but its history goes even further back. We know for certain that this brooch once belonged to the Queen Mother's mother, Princess Mary Adelaide, the Duchess of Teck. It is definitely a 19th century creation, possibly crafted by Garrard. However, Hugh Roberts in The Queen's Diamonds suggests that its history goes even further. He claims that the brooch once belonged to Princess Mary, Duchess of Gloucester. Princess Mary was one of the 15 children of King George III and Queen Charlotte. She married her first cousin, the Duke of Gloucester and Edinburgh, in 1816. She had no children of her own, but was close to her 2 royal nieces, Queen Victoria, daughter of the Duke of Kent, and Princess Mary Adelaide, the Duchess of Teck, daughter of the Duke of Cambridge. When Princess Mary died in 1857, she bequeathed her collection of jewels to Princess Mary Adelaide. We know for sure that the bequest included the Gloucester pendant earrings. If Roberts is correct, perhaps this brooch was also among them. Nonetheless, by the time of her death in 1897, the brooch was definitely in the possession of Princess Mary Adelaide. The Duchess died intestate, and her jewels were divided among her children. This brooch was inherited by her eldest son, Prince Adolphus. Later, he inherited his father's title, becoming the Duke of Teck. However, after the outbreak of World War I, Adolphus renounced his German titles and was appointed Marquess of Cambridge by his son-in-law, King George V. At some point, the brooch passed from hand to hand among the Teck children. By 1923, it was in the collection of Prince Adolphus's elder sister, Queen Mary. In the same year, she passed the brooch to her second son, the Duke of York, to present it to his new bride, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. The Yorks would eventually become King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. She would later be known as the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother wore the brooch from the beginning of her marriage, posing in the lotus flower tiara in the 1920s, and she continued to wear this piece throughout her life. She can often be seen in photographs, wearing it high on her shoulder. Photographer Alan Warren captured her with the brooch during her engagement at Dover Castle in Kent. She also wore the brooch with her festive attire at evening events, as well as during a theatre trip in 1985. When the Queen Mother died in 2002, her jewels were inherited by her daughter, Queen Elizabeth II. The brooch is now in the Queen's collection, but although Roberts says she has worn it occasionally since 2002, it seems that the only public appearance of the jewel so far has been in a portrait taken by her former son-in-law.